The transport ship came down through the clouds above station, carrying supplies, new colonists, and news. Commander Stephen Hayes stood on the observation deck, watching the red dust of the landing field rush up to meet them. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and the tired eyes of someone who had spent years negotiating with alien governments. Behind him, the human colony sprawled across the valley, still young but growing. Somewhere out there, thousands of humans were going about their lives, unaware that their entire future was about to change. Hayes turned away from the window and checked his wrist display. The message had arrived 3 days ago, and he had read it 100 times. They were challenging humanity to send a champion to the grand arena of Vex Prime. The never lost. Not in 300 years, not ever. If humanity sent someone, that person would almost certainly die. The command center was full of people when Hayes entered. Doctor was there, the colony's chief medical officer, and the closest thing they had to a sports scientist. Lieutenant David sat at the communications console. Others filled the room, all waiting for the commander to speak. They knew what this was about. Everyone knew. "They expect an answer by tomorrow," Hayes said. He sat down heavily in his chair. "They are calling it an honor. They are calling it a chance to prove ourselves. What they mean is that they want to prove that humans are weak." Leaned forward. He was younger than Hayes, perhaps 40, with the kind of mind that never stopped thinking. They have not faced real competition in centuries. Their champion has killed or crippled every opponent for 300 years. Sending anyone to face him would be suicide. "They know that," Hayes said. "They have calculated that we will refuse. Then they can go to the Galactic Council and say that humans are afraid. They will say we will not compete fairly. They will use it to block our seat on the council." The room was quiet. Everyone understood the stakes. Humanity was new to the galactic stage. Only 70 years ago, humans had achieved faster-than-light travel. Only 10 years ago had they made contact with the Galactic Union. They had expected a long, slow process of earning respect. They had decided to accelerate things. They had decided to crush humanity quickly. "What if we don't send anyone?" asked. "We lose the council seat," said, "and we lose respect among all the other species. The message becomes clear. Humans fold when faced with pressure." Hayes nodded. "They are betting that we will do exactly that, but they have made a mistake. They have assumed we have no one who can fight." "We do not have soldiers who can compete with genetically enhanced aliens," said. "We have farmers, engineers, scientists. We have colonists. We do not have champions." The commander did not respond immediately. Instead, he pulled up a file on his display and shared it with the room. A video began to play. It showed a young woman moving through a training course at incredible speed. She ran, jumped, climbed, and fought. Everything about her was controlled and precise. Every movement had purpose. The video showed her fighting multiple opponents with combat training gear, defeating each one through speed and technique rather than strength. Stared at the screen. "That is Murphy." "That is right," Hayes said. "Murphy's granddaughter. Murphy served in the military before she retired. She was a tactical officer. She trained from childhood. Everything this girl knows, she learned from her grandmother." "Murphy is 19 years old," said, reading from his own display. "She has no military rank. She is a volunteer in the emergency response team. She has no official authority." "She also has the fastest reflexes I have ever seen," Hayes replied. "She has trained in 6 different martial arts. She understands human psychology. She understands tactics. And she has something else that matters. She has something they do not have. She has nothing to lose." The commander stood up and looked at the people in the room. "I want to speak with her. I want to offer her a choice. I want to tell her what will happen if she agrees. I want to tell her that she will probably die, and I want to see if she still says yes." They found at the water treatment facility where she worked. She was tall and strong, with her grandmother's eyes and her own quiet intensity. When Commander Hayes explained what he wanted, she asked only one question. "What happens if I refuse?" "We lose the council seat," Hayes said honestly. "Humanity gets marked as weak. Other species begin to treat us differently. Over time, it gets harder for all of us." Set down her tool and wiped her hands on her shirt. "Then I will do it." Hayes blinked. "You understand that has killed 100 opponents. You understand that you will be facing something that has only one purpose, to win, to dominate." "I understand," said. Her voice was steady. "My grandmother told me something when I was very small. She said that size and strength are only part of combat. She said the mind is where real battles are fought. She said humans have something that most aliens do not have. We have adaptability. We have the ability to change our thinking in the middle of a fight. We can see what is not working and try something new. Hayes stared at her. They will kill you if you give them the chance. Then I will not give them the chance, said. The training began immediately. Doctor designed a program to maximize advantages. They analyzed videos of fighting. They studied his patterns. They looked for weaknesses in his movements. Every session lasted hours. His body grew more defined. Her movements became faster. Her mind became sharper. 3 weeks later, they stood in the hangar as the transport ship was prepared to carry to Vex Prime. The grand arena waited for her. Millions of aliens would watch her fight. The fate of humanity hung in the balance. Looked out the window at station, at the colony she was about to represent. She thought of her grandmother, who had spent her life training soldiers. She thought of all the humans on this world, people who had come to the stars seeking a future. Then she turned to Commander Hayes. "I am ready," she said. The commander nodded. He knew she was not truly ready. No one could be ready for what was Vex Prime was a world of metal and stone. The grand arena sat at the center of the city, a massive structure that had been used for combat tournaments for 10,000 years. Countless beings had died on this arena floor. Countless others had achieved glory. The sand beneath the arena was said to be half dust, half bone. Stood in the preparation room, dressed in the combat suit provided by the human delegation. It was light and flexible, designed to give her maximum movement. She could feel her heart beating steadily in her chest. Around her, assistants from various species made final checks on her equipment. None of them believed she would survive. Doctor stood beside her, checking the monitoring devices that would track her vital signs during the fight. "Remember what we discussed," he said. "He will come at you hard and fast. He will expect you to break. He will expect you to surrender after he hurts you. He does not understand humans. He does not understand that pain is something we can accept and continue fighting." "I understand," said. "If at any point you feel like you cannot continue, there is no shame in surrender," added. "You will have already done something remarkable by lasting as long as you do." Did not respond. She had no intention of surrendering. The arena entrance opened, walked out into the light and sound of millions of spectators. The crowd was massive. Aliens from dozens of different species filled the stands. Some wanted to see humanity defeated. Others were curious. A few were actually hopping for a human victory, though they were in the minority. His first opponent was a Viridian warrior. The Viridians were crystalline beings, hard as diamonds and almost impossible to hurt with normal weapons. The warrior stood 9 feet tall, with edges sharp enough to cut through steel, had studied the combat data. Viridians were strong but relatively slow. They relied on their hardness and their sharp edges to injure opponents. The match began. The Viridian charged forward, attempting to impale on one of its edges, moved, not away from the attack but sideways, using the Viridian's own momentum against it. She grabbed one of the creature's appendages and twisted. The Viridian had assumed all humans were soft and easy to break. It was shocked to discover that was flexible and strong. She used locks and holds that did not require strength, only understanding of joints and pressure points. After 20 minutes of fighting, the Viridian was exhausted. It had tried every attack it knew. None of them had worked, had evaded or absorbed each one. Finally, the Viridian made a mistake. It reached too far trying to cut. She grabbed the extended limb and pulled it into a lock. The Viridian tried to resist but could not. Its body was too rigid. Its crystalline nature, which was its greatest strength, became its weakness. It surrendered. The crowd erupted in surprise. Humans were not supposed to win. Humans were supposed to be fragile and weak. Walked back to her preparation area. Her body was bruised and cut. The Viridian's edges had caught her several times, but she was not seriously injured. Doctor tended to her wounds while she hydrated and rested. "1 match down," he said. 7 more until you face." The second round came 3 days later. This time fought a warrior. They were a telepathic species, plant-like creatures that communicated through mental connection. The warrior attempted to dominate's mind, to make her surrender without physical combat. It sent waves of despair and hopelessness into her consciousness, trying to break her will. Had trained for this. Her grandmother had taught her meditation techniques. She had learned to quiet her mind and observe her thoughts without becoming lost in them. This mental assault washed over her like wind passing over stone. She acknowledged the despair it sent, but did not accept it. She remained centered. Then attacked. She moved faster than the expected, closing the distance between them. Hand-to-hand combat was not the strength. They relied on mental domination. Without that advantage, they was nearly helpless. used grappling techniques, attacking joints and vulnerable areas. After 30 minutes, the surrendered, its confidence shattered. 2 victories, 2 impossible victories. The other competitors began to watch more carefully. The fighter, a massive being from a high-gravity world, approached her between matches. "You fight like you have something to prove," the said. Its voice was deep and slow. "Humans always have something to prove. That is why you will eventually lose." "Perhaps," said, "but I will not lose today." By the time the semifinals arrived, had fought 5 opponents. She had won all 5 matches. Her body was covered in injuries. Her muscles ached. Her mind was exhausted from the constant pressure of combat, but her record was perfect. The media across the galaxy was paying attention now. Humans were not supposed to be able to do this. The semifinal match was against a warrior, a species known for their military tradition and combat skill. Though was faster than most of its previous opponents. It had real training and real experience. For the first time, faced someone who understood tactics and strategy as well as she did. The match lasted almost an hour, and the traded strikes and blocks, each looking for an opening. Neither gave in. The crowd watched in silence, impressed by the level of skill both combatants displayed. In the end, won by making her opponent tired. She had better endurance. She could continue when her opponent began to slow. She used her speed to create distance when she needed to recover. When the finally made a mistake from exhaustion was ready, she secured a hold and forced surrender. 6 victories, no losses. Doctor stood beside in the preparation area before the final match. He held a screen showing video footage of. The massive warrior stood 12 feet tall. His body was reinforced with genetic modifications that had been perfected over thousands of years. His movements were precise and controlled. In his last fight, he had killed his opponent in less than 2 minutes. "This is different," said quietly. "Everything else you have fought has had limitations, is different, was built for one purpose, to dominate, to win, to destroy anything that stands in front of him." Stared at the screen, she watched move. She watched his patterns. She had studied him for weeks. She had memorized every fight. She understood his tendencies, but understanding was not the same as being able to stop him. "Are you afraid?" asked. Thought about the question. Was she afraid? Yes, she was terrified. But fear while the day of the final match arrived with clear skies and a cold wind that swept across the arena floor, stood in the preparation room and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was bruised from 6 previous matches. Her body was covered in cuts and marks. Her hands were wrapped tightly in combat bindings. She looked like someone who had been through a war. In a way, she had. The door opened. Doctor entered with a final report on her condition. "Your left shoulder has inflammation," he said. "Your right knee is not perfect. You have minor cuts across your torso. Otherwise, you are cleared to fight." "Will I be able to move?" asked. "Yes, you will be able to move. You will not be at your full capacity, but you will be able to move." That was all needed to hear. She stood up and nodded. It was time. The arena entrance opened for the final time, walked out into the sunlight and the roar of millions of voices. The crowd was different this time. Before, many had come to watch humanity fail. Now they came to watch what would happen next. Humans were not supposed to be able to do what had done, but she had done it anyway. On the opposite side of the arena, stepped out into the light. He was massive, had known he would be massive. She had seen videos. She had studied his proportions. But standing in the same arena as him, with no barriers between them, his size hit her like a physical force. He was more than 12 feet tall. His body was covered in muscle that seemed almost impossible, reinforced with biological enhancements that had been refined over thousands of years of genetic engineering. His skin was a dark red color, covered in natural armor that had been battle-tested countless times. His eyes were cold and empty. They were the eyes of a creature that had only one purpose: to win. The crowd fell silent as stepped toward the center of the arena, walked toward him slowly. She could hear her own breathing. She could feel her heart beating. Around them, millions of beings watched. On station, thousands of humans were watching. Her grandmother was watching somewhere, was certain of that. The signal came. The match had begun. Moved with incredible speed for his size, he covered the distance between them in 2 massive strides. His first attack was a straightforward strike, designed to crush through sheer force. She had expected this. The data showed that always started with overwhelming force. He expected opponents to either block the strike and be crushed by the impact, or try to run and be run down. Did neither. She twisted her body sideways as strike came at her. His massive hand passed through the space where she had been standing a fraction of a second before. She felt the air pressure from the movement. It would have killed her instantly if it had connected. His eyes narrowed. He had expected to end the match in the first 10 seconds. Instead, his opponent had moved. She had actually moved fast enough to avoid his attack. His second strike came from his other side, trying to catch her as she recovered, was already moving, using the momentum from her dodge to roll away. She came up behind him, circling, turned to face her again. He was not worried. He had faced faster opponents before. Speed did not matter much against overwhelming power. For the next 20 minutes, tried to hit. Every strike was powerful enough to shatter stone. Every move was practiced and refined through hundreds of years of combat experience, but was faster. She had studied his movements for weeks. She understood his patterns better than he did. She evaded strike after strike, slipping past his hands by inches, ducking under his arcs of attack, moving away from his kicks just in time. Was becoming frustrated. He had never fought an opponent who could simply move away from all of his strikes. In all of his previous fights, opponents had either blocked his attacks or been hit by them. No one had simply avoided them entirely. He increased his speed. His attacks became faster and more desperate, continued to move, but she was beginning to tire. Her injuries from the previous matches were making themselves felt. Her shoulder was burning, her knee was weak. She could not dodge forever. Eventually, one of strikes would connect. It happened in the 35th minute of the match. Threw a powerful diagonal strike its midsection. She tried to roll past it, but her injured knee slowed her just slightly. His forearm caught her ribs. The impact was like being hit by a truck. Felt ribs crack. She flew backward across the arena floor and crashed down hard. The crowd erupted. This was what they had been waiting for. Finally, the human was down. Finally was landing hits. Gasped for air. The pain in her ribs was incredible. Every breath felt like knives. But she forced herself to keep breathing. She forced herself to stay conscious. She had trained for this. She had prepared for the possibility that she would be hurt. Pain was temporary. Surrender was permanent. She pushed herself to her feet, charged at her immediately, trying to finish what he had started, but had learned something important in that moment when she was on the ground. Relied on overwhelming force. When he hit an opponent, he expected them to stay down. He expected them to surrender or die. He did not understand that humans could continue fighting even when they were badly hurt. Moved again, not away from but toward him. She had studied his fighting style carefully. When came at her with full power, his body assumed certain positions. His joints bent in certain ways. There was one moment, a fraction of a second, when his body was not perfectly balanced. Had memorized that moment. She had trained for it with Doctor. Threw another massive strike at her head. Let it come close, very close. She felt the air pressure from the impact. Then, in that critical moment when his arm was fully extended and his body was committed to the strike, moved. She did not try to match his strength. She used his own momentum against him. She grabbed his extended arm and twisted her body with explosive force. His arm was not meant to bend in that direction, had never experienced pain like this before. His shoulder, reinforced as it was not designed for the kind of stress that was putting on it. Screamed. It was a sound that had not been heard in 300 years. The sound of the undefeated champion in agony. Held the position, her entire body focused on maintaining the lock. Struggled, trying to use his strength to break free, but had positioned him perfectly. His strength was useless. He could only struggle or surrender. The moment lasted forever and no time at all. Released his arm and stepped back. The champion fell to the arena floor, clutching his injured shoulder. Medical teams from multiple species rushed into the arena. They surrounded and began examining his injury. Stood alone in the center of the arena, breathing hard, her body screaming with pain. The crowd erupted, not in unison but in waves. Some spectators stood and cheered, others sat in shocked silence. The in the stands were on their feet, their faces showing fury and disbelief. This could not have happened. This was not possible, but it had happened. A human had defeated the greatest warrior they had ever produced. Doctor and the medical team from station rushed toward. She tried to walk toward them, but her legs would not carry her. The pain in her ribs made even breathing difficult. She knelt down on the arena floor, her body finally giving in to the abuse it had endured over the past weeks of combat. Reached her first. He scanned her with medical instruments, checking her vital signs and her injuries. "You have fractured ribs," he said. "Possible damage to your spleen, severe trauma across your entire body, but you are alive, you won." Tried to speak, but the pain in her ribs made it difficult. She nodded instead. She looked up at the arena, at the millions of beings watching her, at the ancient stone walls that had witnessed 10,000 years of combat. She had come to this place to prove that humans belonged in the galaxy. She had done that. Medics placed her on a stretcher and carried her out of the arena. The roar of the crowd followed her out. In the medical center, doctor worked for hours using advanced human medical technology to repair the damage that had done. The fractured ribs would heal, the bruises would fade, the cuts would close, but the scars would remain. News broadcasts began almost immediately. Across the entire Galactic Union, the story spread. Humanity had won the Grand Arena Championship. A human girl had defeated. The undefeated warrior had surrendered. The implications were staggering. Smaller species, those that had always assumed they were inferior to thee and the other powerful races, began to hope. If humans could do this, what else was possible? If a young woman from a newly spacefaring species could defeat the greatest warrior in the galaxy, then maybe the power structures of the Galactic Union were not as fixed as everyone had believed. They demanded a rematch. They called it a fluke. They said it used tricks and deception. They said the rules of the arena were unfair. The Galactic Council listened to their complaints and then issued a ruling. No rematch would be allowed for one full cycle of the Galactic Union calendar, would have time to recover, but he would have to accept that he had lost, at least for now. Commander Hayes arrived at Vex Prime 2 weeks after the final match. He found in the medical facility, still recovering from her injuries. She was thin and pale from the medical treatments, but her eyes were alert. When she saw Hayes, she tried to sit up. "No," Hayes said, putting a hand on her shoulder gently. "Rest. You have earned the right to rest." Hayes spent the next hour telling about what was happening on station and across human space. The colony was celebrating. News of her victory had spread to every human settlement in the galaxy. Young people were training now, taking martial arts lessons, preparing for the future. The image of a human girl defeating an alien warrior had done something that diplomatic speeches and negotiations never could. It had made every human believe that they had a place in the galaxy. "The Council has agreed to give us a seat," Hayes said. "Not because they fear us now, but because they respect us. You have earned this. This is your achievement." "It was my grandmother's achievement too," said. "She taught me everything. She taught me that humans are not weak. She taught me that we can adapt and overcome. I just applied what she taught me." Hayes nodded. He understood the truth in her words, had not won the fight alone. She was the product of human training, human tactics, human strategy. But she was also the product of her own courage and determination. 2 weeks later was well enough to travel. The transport ship carried her back to station. As it descended through the atmosphere, she looked down at the colony. Hundreds of people had gathered at the landing field to greet her. When she stepped out of the ship, the crowd erupted in cheers. Her grandmother was there. Murphy was an old woman now, thin and gray, but her eyes were sharp as ever. When she saw, she smiled. It was a smile of pride and satisfaction. "You did what I taught you," said. "I did what you taught me," agreed. That night there was a celebration in the main colony hall. Humans from across station came to thank and to celebrate humanity's new status in the galaxy, but did not spend the entire evening at the party. In the middle of the celebration, she slipped away. She went to the training facility where she had first learned to fight. She stood on the mat and looked at her reflection in the mirror. She was different now. She was the warrior who had defeated, but she was also still human, still someone with responsibilities. The next morning, she went to the colony school and asked to speak to the students. The principal agreed, and soon was standing in front of 200 young humans, ranging in age from 6 to 18. "I want to tell you about my fight with," she began. "I want to tell you about what I learned and why it matters. Was bigger than me. He was stronger than me. He had more experience than me. By every measure that says strength and size are important, should have won. But he did not win. He lost. And do you know why?" The children stared at her, listening intently. "Because he did not understand humans," said. "He did not understand that we are adaptable. He did not understand that we can change our thinking in the middle of a fight. He did not understand that we can take pain and continue anyway. These are human traits. These are things that make us strong, not because we are bigger or faster or have better technology. We are strong because of how we think. We are strong because we refuse to accept that something is impossible." Spent the next hour talking to the students about training, about discipline, about the importance of understanding your opponent and understanding yourself. She talked about fear and how to move forward even when you are afraid. By the time she was done, every young person in that room wanted to learn martial arts. 6 months had passed since Murphy had defeated in the grand arena of Vex Prime. The effects of that single victory had rippled outward across the entire Galactic Union, changing the way that species thought about power, strength, and potential. Humanity's seat on the Galactic Council had been officially confirmed. Commander Hayes had taken the position of humanity's first official representative. He spent his days in diplomatic meetings and negotiations, working to establish human interests across the galaxy. But he always made time to check on. She was training a new generation now. The human colony had established a formal combat academy. Young humans from across the star systems came to station to learn the techniques that had used to defeat. They learned martial arts, tactical thinking, and the philosophy that had guided its victory. The most important lesson was always the same. Humans are adaptable, and adaptability was a form of strength that transcended size and genetic enhancement. Still bore the scars of her fight with. Her left shoulder was stronger than it had been before, but she knew she would never have full range of motion again. Her ribs sometimes ached when she breathed too deeply. Her right knee needed careful attention during intense physical activity. But these scars had meaning. They were proof that she had faced something impossible and survived. One morning was working with a group of young humans in the training facility when Doctor entered. He was smiling, which was unusual. Was a serious man, not given to displays of emotion. "We have a visitor," said, "someone from off-world." A warrior entered the training facility. His hand moved instinctively toward her combat stance, but she stopped herself. This was different from smaller, younger, perhaps no more than 30 years old. The visitor wore no combat gear. Instead, he wore simple clothes and carried a small bag. "I am Vex," the said. His voice was deep but not aggressive. "I am here to speak with Murphy." Studied him carefully, there was something in his posture that suggested deference. "I am," she said. "What do you want?" "I want to learn what you have learned," Vex said. "I want to understand how you defeated, not so that I can fight you, but so that I can think differently about what strength means." Had not expected this. She had expected anger from she had expected demands for revenge or rematch. She had not expected someone to come asking for help. "Why do you want to learn this?" asked. Vex stepped forward. "Because has always taught us that strength comes from power, from size, from biological enhancement. But you showed us that this is not true. You showed us that a smaller, weaker person can defeat a stronger opponent if they understand the right way to think. My people have been told for thousands of years that we are superior because we are strong. But your victory proved that strength is more complex than we believed. I want to understand this." Looked at, he could see the consideration in her face. This was a decision that only she could make. "You can stay," said finally. "You can train with us. But you need to understand something. I am not teaching you to defeat your own people. I am teaching you to think. I am teaching you that adaptability and understanding are forms of strength that matter as much as power." Vex nodded. "I understand. That is what I have come to learn." Over the next weeks, Vex trained alongside the human students. At first, the humans were suspicious of him. He was and was also but as they watched Vex work, they saw that he was genuine in his desire to learn. He was not trying to become a warrior. He was trying to become something more. He was trying to become someone who understood. Worked with Vex individually, teaching him meditation techniques and mental discipline. She showed him how to quiet the aggressive impulses that biology encouraged. She taught him that peace and adaptability could be forms of strength, not weakness. Meanwhile, other species across the galaxy were making similar discoveries. The Viridians, who had assumed their crystalline structure made them perfect, began to explore other forms of combat and cooperation. The who had relied on telepathy began to study the value of physical training and tactical movement. The who prided themselves on their military tradition began to question whether size and firepower were truly the measure of victory. Received official recognition from the Galactic Council. She was honored as a warrior and a teacher. But more importantly, she was recognized as someone who had changed the way the galaxy thought about itself. She had proven that the old power structures did not have to be permanent. She had shown that potential existed in places where others had not looked. A year after her victory, was asked to speak at a formal gathering of the Council. She stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Union, looking at representatives from 100 different species. I did not defeat because I was the best fighter, said, speaking slowly so that the translation systems could keep up. I defeated him because I was willing to think differently. I was willing to adapt. I was willing to fail. Every species in this chamber has been told that certain things are the way things are. Humans are weak. Smaller species are inferior. Power comes from size and technology, but these are just beliefs. They are not facts. When I stepped into that arena, I believed that these old beliefs did not have to define me. I believed that I could create something new, and I was right. You can too. The Galactic Council was silent. Then, slowly, the representatives of various species began to respond in their own ways. The humans applauded. The clicked his approval. The saluted. The Viridian pulsed with light. Even some of the not all but some nodded in acknowledgement. That night stood on the observation deck of the transport that was carrying her back to station. Doctor stood beside her, looking out at the stars. "What do you think happens now?" asked. "I think things change slowly," said. "We'll probably demand that rematch when the cycle ends. There will still be who believe in the old ways, but there will also be Vex and others like him. Change is slow, but it is possible." Smiled, "You have done something remarkable. You have not just won a victory. You have changed the way an entire galaxy thinks about itself." Shook her head. "I did what my grandmother taught me. I showed humans that we are capable. Everything else comes after that." As the transport moved through space, thought about all the humans on all the different colonies throughout human space. She thought about them training now, believing in themselves, understanding that they had a place in the galaxy. She thought about Vex and the other aliens who were beginning to question old assumptions. Her grandmother had taught her something important when she was very young. She had said that every person has the ability to change the world. You just have to be willing to fight for it. Had fought. She had stepped into an arena that she should have lost. And by refusing to surrender, by adapting and thinking clearly when everything was against her, she had proved something important. Humans did not need to be the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. They needed to be the most adaptable. They needed to be willing to think their way through impossible situations. They needed to be willing to believe that victory was possible even when everything suggested it was not. The transport jumped through space toward station. In the holds, new equipment for the Academy was being transported. In the communication systems, messages from humans all across the galaxy were being sent to, telling her about young people who were training, who were preparing, who believed that they could achieve great things because she had shown them it was possible. And on the observation deck, Murphy looked out at the infinite darkness and infinite possibility of space. She was just one person, but one person willing to fight, willing to adapt, willing to believe when others did not, could change everything. That was the message that the galaxy had received. That was the legacy that she was building. It was a good legacy. It was a human legacy, and it was only the beginning. That was when understood the real victory. It was not just her win in the arena. It was the fact that humans across the galaxy now believed they could achieve great things. That belief would change everything. The crowd had gone completely silent. No one had ever done this to before. No one had ever made him hurt. Finally, as the pain became overwhelming, did something he had never done before. He signaled surrender. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, the entire galaxy understood what had happened. Humanity had won. It's not the same as doubt. She did not doubt that she could fight. She did not doubt that she could try. She did not doubt that she could hurt him if she got the chance. "I am ready," she said finally. That night, as lay in her quarters, she thought about her grandmother. Murphy had lived through 3 wars. She had lost friends and comrades. But she had also learned something that she had passed to. In combat, the person who breaks mentally loses first. The physical victory comes after the mental battle is already won. Tomorrow would face. Tomorrow, she would find out if everything her grandmother had taught her was true. Oming, but he also understood something else. Murphy was exactly what humanity needed. She was not afraid of the impossible. She was ready to face it anyway. The ship prepared for launch. In a few days would arrive at Vex Prime. In a few weeks she would step into the grand arena. The thought they were about to teach humanity a lesson. They were wrong. They were about to learn one instead.